Noticing the time is now 6:30. I'd like to commence tonight's Select Board meeting held on Monday, October 3rd, 2022, Walkway Meeting Room, Mashpee Town Hall, 16 Great Neck Road North, Mashpee, Massachusetts, 02649. Broadcast live on cable channel 18, streamed live on the Town of Mashpee website. It's now 6:30. Convene the meeting in open session. We'll begin with the Pledge of the Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There's been some severe weather events. We hold the people in Florida and in Puerto Rico in our hearts, and maybe we have a moment of silence for those folks. Thank you. I'd like to accept a motion to approve the meeting minutes from Monday, September 12th, 2022, regular session and executive sessions.
So moved.
Hearing a first and second, roll call vote. Carol?
Yes.
Mr. Cotton?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
And I'm yes. That motion passes. I'll accept the motion to accept Monday, September 19th, 2022, regular session meeting minutes as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Hearing a first and second, roll call vote. Mr. O'Hara?
Yes.
Mr. Cotton?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
And I'm a yes on that as well. That motion passes also. Moving on to appointments and hearings, we'll begin with the first line item, public comment. We only have three, going in the order as signed up. Mr. Ken Dabrowski. If you could please come to the microphone and state your name and address for the record.
Going to start before Wayne gets the clicker.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ken Dabrowski, 3 Grayfield Landing. Basically, tonight I want to follow up on an email I sent you guys beginning of last week, Monday, Tuesday. Basically, I was looking to see when we were going, it relates to Article 26 here from the May 2nd town meeting. I'll just read it, it's short. To see if the town will vote to instruct the select board to address immediately the growing burden of onerous property tax increases on the town's low and moderate income property owners. This action should be completed in ample time to report to the citizenry prior to the next public hearing on the town's tax classification. Explanation: the value of the homes in Mashpee have risen immensely in recent years. Those increases have in turn brought about large increases in property taxes. The town less financially fortunate property owners are feeling the financial squeeze. Other towns facing the same problem have found a variety of solutions. The Mashpee Select Board should set to work immediately to find, emphasis added, to find solutions to this problem. The Board of Selectmen recommends approval of Article 26 by a vote of 5-0, unanimous. When does that ever happen? So anyway, basically my email was just wondering, I looked at the calendar and the, what is it called, the classification meeting? That was on November 29th, I think, last year. So basically, if you look at this year's calendar, you guys are probably going to push that to the first one in December. So I think that's December 4th, if I remember correctly. So that gives you only 3 meetings to have this public review, comment kind of presentation thing. And I wrote you an email a while back saying that, look, you know, you don't want to have these discussions, these public hearing discussions in the meeting where you have to do, vote on the, whatever it is you're voting on, take action. It's like, you go through this thing and you're evaluating it with a gun to your head. I mean, that's going to lead to a suboptimal decision. So basically, if somebody could just get back to me, let me know if you're going to do this thing. I mean, if you're not going to do it, you're not going to do it. Just tell me that. Or if you are going to do it, there's only, you got 3 choices, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, it's not complex. One thing. Ooh, I got a minute. I'm going to do it. Okay, I shared this with Mr. Collins. This was something I put together. this is analysis, my analysis based on the assessor database that's available online. So, but basically, the numbers, I think, are, I had to make some simplifying assumptions, and, I used the guidance in the DOR website on how to implement the residential tax credit. And like I said, I did make some simplifying assumptions here. There's this floor thing that I really didn't deal with. But anyway, I think, the numbers here are, I would say it's like an 80% solution. I mean, it's probably within, like I said, a plus or minus 20%. But basically, what I think this is the way I think you got to look at it. Okay, you got to look at it. It's really simple. It's resident population, non-resident population, segmented by quartile. You can't just do it in aggregate. Can I get a little more time? Okay, so you can't just look at it in aggregate. You got to segment it by quartile, because that's where you're going to see the impact on the various populations within those groups. And if you could see, take a look at the average assessments here, you can see there's a big variance in both groups on these various assessments. So again, this will show you who's impacted and by how much, and again, along demographics as well as resident, non-resident. So I think you really have to look at it that way. And what you can do is, this model, again, I did this in Excel in like an hour. So, I mean, it's not complex. And the other thing you're going to look, I think you should be looking at various exemption percentages. So again, do the analysis along those slugs, okay? Do it at 25, do it at 35, do it at 15. I mean, pick whichever ones you want. But again, it should, you should be able to create a model where you just plop the exception in and it gives you the answer. Because again, the base is the same. Once you work it through and you get all the, the 10% and some of the trusts and all that other kind of stuff. I did go through it, and I feel for the assessor. It's not easy, so.
We appreciate your comments.
All right, I'm over my time. Thanks.
Thank you.
If you got any questions on this, I mean, you got my email, my phone number, I'll take you through it.
Will do. Thank you. Next on the list is Michaela Colombo.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Michaela, Wyman, Colombo, Meadowbrook Road. For full disclosure, I'm a candidate for Select Board, but I'm speaking as a resident. Over the past couple of months, I've talked to and listened to hundreds and hundreds of Mashpee residents. I've done that at their doors, on the phone, outside of Stop and Shop, and at various locations. Regardless of their demographic characteristics, and regardless of where they live, the residents I've talked to and listened to are overwhelmingly concerned about cleaning our waters with urgency. The residents know that our ponds, our rivers, and our estuaries are all in danger. As Mashpee residents, we know that our waters are our lifeblood. Additionally, we know our waters drive our economy. As a town, I know we've worked hard to restore cranberry bogs to wetlands, implemented aquaculture, and have addressed storm runoff in several areas. I'm so glad we'll be breaking ground on a wastewater treatment plant and a collection system very, very soon, and I know it'll make a difference. It's a critical, critical step, and yet it's just part of the solution. We really have to put in additional systems to eliminate contamination from storm runoff, maintain Mashpee's environmentally sensitive land, explore the use of denight systems in areas that aren't ever going to be sewered, and continue to employ remedies such as agriculture and wetland restorations. Right now, our groundwater is saturated with nitrogen. And until we address this problem, we cannot continue to overdevelop in ways that continue to put more nitrogen into the ground. It just doesn't work. I would ask the Select Board to put water quality issues and nitrogen pollution on as an ongoing agenda item so that we start to solve this problem with real urgency, the urgency that it requires. I thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next on the list, we have our last public comment, Greg Mckelvey.
Good evening, folks. Greg Mckelvey, 11 Menipshire Road in Mashpee. For full disclosure, member of the Finance Committee and also a candidate for the Select Board, which election is tomorrow from 7 to 5 at the Washington School. My comments are as a private citizen as well. Over the last 2 months, I have talked to hundreds of people, from Stop and Shop to Roach Brothers, from the post office, for different folks. And people are concerned about the water quality. And they appreciate the fact that the town is moving as expeditiously as possible by putting in the sewer system, by spending money, the $54 million sewer project that they put in there. They're grateful that that's happening. They see the town's moving forward and work into that thing. And I think that as you do that, another thing that I've heard is that they're concerned about the financial impact of that. How does that affect long-term taxes? How does it affect long-term spending? And how do you balance spending with this project? That's a real concern. Thank goodness we have a great financial team with the treasurer and the assessor and the finance director to help us do that over the years. I'm hoping that we can continue to move forward as fast as we can with a cautious eye on the finances so the town is not in any type of jeopardy as it goes forward. And I think people are grateful that you're doing something and have been doing something, and they see that. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you. Moving on, discussion and approval of the following applications. Special event season of illumination hosted by the Mashpee Chamber of Commerce. I did not ask anyone to come in. This is an annual event, so I'd accept a motion to approve unless someone feels compelled to speak on his behalf.
I'm Liaison to the Chamber, and they're doing everything as same as last year.
Okay.
So I make a motion to approve.
A second.
Hearing a first and second, roll call vote.
Yes.
Mr. O'Hara? Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
4 yeses, that motion's approved. Moving on, we have the temporary sign permit for the annual psychic fair, Mashpee Boosters Club. This is another one that is an annual event. I didn't ask anyone to come in and speak on his behalf. If anyone feels compelled to, we'll hear those comments.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Hearing a first and second, Mrs. Sherman,
Yes.
Mr. Cotton.
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
O'Hara. And I'm a yes. That motion is unanimous and is approved. This brings us to a next item, presented by our DPW Director, Kathleen Laurent. Discussion or approval of the following: award of contracts for road salt, pre-salt, and pre-treated salt and agricultural byproduct. As a first matter,
Good evening.
welcome.
So this is a request to award contract for our annual snow and ice products. This is a collective bid that we do with Plymouth and Barnstable counties. The memo before you outlines the low bidders for the town of Mashpee. There is one new product that I added this year, the pre-treated salt. Generally, we treat the salt ourselves, but it's nice to have the option when there's a difficulty with getting material and/or time before a storm to order the salt already treated.
And I see there's a 29% increase.
Yes.
On one of them.
Yeah. One. As everything has gone up, unfortunately.
Is this consistent, the increase, is it consistent with the past few years, or is this,
So the increase this year for the salt is 13% increase. The 29% is just with the agricultural byproduct. In most years, you do see an increase. This is slightly higher than in the past, which I'm sure has to do a lot with the delivery costs. This product is all delivered to the town.
and I forget, did we deplete the, what we had for last year?
I'm sorry?
Did we deplete what we ordered for last year?
So just because end of the season, we do tend to try to keep our sheds relatively full until, sometime in March. So we do have one full shed at this time, one shed is empty.
Anyone have any questions or comments?
No, it is what it is. It's been out for bid, so. Motion to approve the bids to purchase salt and agricultural byproducts, safe melt through a regional bid with the counties of Barnstable and Plymouth.
Second?
Hearing a first and second, roll call vote, Mr. Sherman,
Yes.
Mr. Cotton.
Yes.
Yes.
Still, I'm a yes as well. Fiscal year 2023 snow plow contract rates?
Right. So it's been a few years since we've increased the rates in light of the increase in fuel costs over this past year, as well as trying to remain competitive and retain contract plow drivers. I am proposing an increase for vehicles and equipment of $15 per hour and an additional $5 per hour incentive for contractors to return to Mashpee. So drivers that plowed with us this past year, if they come back, they would get an additional $5 per hour.
Has there been many complaints about the existing rates?
Not complaints per se, but we generally, this time of year, will do a comparison to our surrounding communities to make sure that we are staying competitive, and I can say that everyone is increasing their rates. We all are in need of contractors. I'm not sure of any municipality that's able to provide the services without hiring contractors. And what we've found is that they don't necessarily go to another municipality, they go to the private sector. So we're competing not only with, the surrounding towns, we're also competing with, just, plowing parking lots or driveways where they can charge a lot more per, visit to plow a driveway than what they would get on an hourly rate for the town.
Now, the other question I have is, typically you only bring on 20 contractors. How many do you typically have apply for the proposal?
The last several years, we've pretty much hired anyone who has applied to the town. When I first started working for the town, I think we had close to 20 contractors. Now, I think this past year, we were closer to 10. It's like I said, we are losing a lot of the contractors. We used to have, landscaping companies that would give us multiple trucks for the season. They don't work for us anymore. They all are doing private jobs now.
Anyone else have comments, concerns?
No,
I'd accept a motion to approve the fiscal year 23 snowplow contract rates as presented.
So moved.
Second?
Hearing a first and second, Mr. O'Hara,
Yes.
Mr. Cotton,
yes.
Ms. Sherman?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well.
Thank you very
That
much.
motion's
Thank you,
unanimous.
Kathy.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thanks.
Moving on, we have Mr. Brian Howes to present the water quality presentation from UMass Dartmouth. Hello, good evening.
How are you doing, Dave? I'm fine.
That's a
I
big
was
how do you do?
scanning the room. I didn't see you right away. Welcome back.
Yes, that's why I'm so relaxed, all right. I do want to acknowledge before I start, though, that Don McDonald is stepping down as running the program after this year. He's done it for forever, and he's done a really good job, and he's kept everything going, and he's kept all the people in line. And he will be taken, his place will be taken, to the extent it can ever be taken, by Ashley Fisher, who, believe it or not, wanted it, which to me is really, you guys hire the right people in town. Right? So, and she'll be taking, have worked with her for years already on other projects, and we're working with her on the Mashpee Wakeby project as well. So it's a seamless transition. But it is a big change. All right, so I'm just here to talk, as usual, about summer 2021, but I'm actually not going to. You guys have listened to this over and over again. I'm going to give you a very brief overview. It's, I think there's only like 10 or 11 substantive slides. And now we have enough data that we can start really looking at, you don't have to look at this stuff. We can start doing 3-year averages, and it's easier to look at, and it's much more robust data for making decisions now, finally. Okay, so I'll just start with the normal, usual stuff everybody knows, but for those out in TV land, the major problem in the oceans globally, and all the Baltic Sea is a classic example. Tampa Bay, where they just had a hurricane, has a huge eutrophication problem from too much nitrogen loading. Buzzards Bay has it. Everybody has this now because people since 1950s have bought land near the water. So even though in our region, the population hasn't increased overall, like in the Buzzards Bay watershed, it didn't increase very much since the 50s. Maybe it went up like 1.5 times. But what happened was people moved out of the city in the urban areas and all around the coast. And back in the 1950s, there's almost nobody living on all those 28 embayments in Buzzards Bay. 1950, Pompanesett Bay did not have dense population. Wacoit Bay did not have dense population. So what's really happened is that all the people that move here now first take up the spaces right at the shoreline, and then back, and then back, and then back. And now we're filling up all those spaces, and that is what's causing the problem. Because the first houses in the septic systems long ago reached the bay, and the second tier in long ago reached the bay, and on and on and on, and we just keep adding more nitrogen now. This nitrogen enrichment this program has documented that it is causing the impairment to Wacoit and Pompanesett Bays. It's not anything else. It is too much nitrogen relative to the amount of water that's in the bay and how quickly it turns over. The only way that you can manage nitrogen, the obvious one, is while you control the sources, and that's what you guys have been working and trying to do with this $54 million treatment plant. That's a source reduction. And there's other things that have happened too as well. The shellfish program has reduced nitrogen in the bays. Sometimes cranberry bog restoration was mentioned. That those are all of those different tools. But in Mashpee, unfortunately, especially for the Mashpee Pompanesett Bay, there's just too much watershed to attack it without sewering. There has to be some sewering and a fair amount of sewering. Okay, and you can also, if you can increase the tidal exchange, which pretty much is, I think we've sort of exhausted that, except in maybe 1 or 2 tributaries, and you can build in things, like I said, like cranberry bog conversion to wetlands will remove nitrogen before it gets from the watershed into the bay. If it doesn't get to the bay, we don't care. So there are other tools that will remove nitrogen. If Santuit Pond ever is restored, that may actually increase its nitrogen removal too. So, but right now it's a mess. But this is a saltwater night. You can have freshwater night anytime you want, but tonight's saltwater, right? All right, so the goals of the program are to assess what's going on now, and that's why we do it each year, because things are variable and they do change from year to year. And 2021, I'll just tell you, you're not going to see it much in the data, but 2021 was sort of a mild summer for nutrients, which means that things were just horrible. They weren't extremely horrible. So the condition of the bay is just bad all over. But so when you look at a year and you say, hey, that's a little bit better, yeah, but it doesn't mean anything because the next year it's going to be back where it was. And if you look at the 10 years of data, it's just pretty much flat or declining. That's what we get. Look at short-term changes, which is what we do because we do year to year. And then the most important thing is going to come online once sewering starts and some of these other things start. We have looked at the effectiveness of the bivalve aquaculture, with oysters and quahogs, and that we did see effects on the water quality, positive effects, and that has to be continued all the time before you can see the effects, right? I mean, if you stop doing it, then you stop getting the effect. The sewering is going to be the big one. We will be looking at changes in the bay and tracking that very closely. Oh, and the good news is, we have seen in other systems that when you do that type of effect, you do get improvement. And it starts occurring relatively quickly, okay? Because you're going to be picking up stuff that from the front couple tiers as well as the back tiers. So we should start seeing positive effects, as we have seen in other areas that we have tracked, both shifts in treatment plant quality, like in West Falmouth, or septic system type removals. So it can happen, and it will happen here soon, but it has to start. So as usual, we did 18 stations throughout, all the way up in Wacoit, in the bay. We did an offshore station all up in the river system, Charles River system, the main bay, up into Quashnet, Yehu, and Hamlin Pond systems. So we cover the whole bay. We do the same thing in Papaneset. It's the whole bay. It's 14 stations. It's a slightly smaller system, less diverse. And we do four sampling events each summer. In the beginning, we did like many more than that, 8, 10. But after you've done it for a while, the costs, it's not worth doing more than 4. So we cut it way back. And with 4, we've been able to capture all the major effects that you want to see. And maybe, if you get to phase 2 or so of the soaring, you might increase a couple if you start seeing something positive, because everybody wants a little more data that it's positive. But right now, I do not recommend any increase in the program. Okay, so here's the first real data. Let me put this on slideshow. My mistake for not doing that, I apologize. Okay, so that's a little bigger. So what we get here, this is laser pointer. Oh yeah, these don't show up on, oh it does, super duper. Super duper. So the real thing here that's distressing is this red dot is the regulatory.
Back screen.
How about this? No. The lower line here is the regulatory threshold for restoration of the main basin of Wacoit Bay. Quashnet River since Quashnet River never had eelgrass that we can find in here, this is Quashnet River, that there's a higher threshold. In other words, you're allowed to have more in there because there was no eelgrass to restore. You can't restore something that was never there. So that's why you're allowed to put more in there. But if you look at Quashnet, it's in some cases 2 and 3 times higher than the threshold. Threshold's 0.5, so this is over 1.5 in the upper part. Even here now, rightly, in the last 6 years, it's been almost 1.5 in the mid. So it's getting worse and moving down. And what you'll see is, as it moves down, now we're starting to get this ramping up in the lowest portion. So basically, the bad is moving this way. Not in that one, in this one. So everything is, not in that one either, sorry, David, in this one. So it's just getting, first it was the head that was bad, variable but bad. The mid then has now for 6 years has been very bad. And now the low is getting really bad. It's over the limit, so it's impaired, but I will tell you, Quashnet River is the poster child for the worst water quality, worst habitat quality in Mashpee. And in fact, probably in most of the South Shore of the Cape. All right, it's just been very heavily impaired. And that's just the way it is. We tried to grow oysters in there a few years ago as a test case to see if you could do that, and you couldn't grow them in the head or the mid region. You could only grow them in the lower. The salinity and the physiology of the oysters just would not grow. They didn't die, but they didn't grow, and that's no good. The thing that is somewhat distressing, as you'll see in a second, is in here, is that the Great River, Little River, but really not just the ponds of Yehu Pond and Hamlin Pond are starting to get a little worse. All right, this is just nitrogen, but if you look at all the parameters together, they're starting to get a little worse. And it makes sense, as you'll see in a second. I'll show you why, but it's disturbing. Most of the rest of the bay is just, I mean, if you're impaired, you're impaired. Once you get over 0.7 on this scale here, you're severely degraded. You can't get more severely degraded than severely degraded. It's like if you're dead, you're dead. It is literally like that. You have wiped out most of the animals and fish and in the summer. It doesn't mean in the winter they can't come back in a little bit, fish especially, because they move around a lot. but you've taken away their food. So you have to get something to happen before they can come back into and grow. They can live, but they can't grow. So it's just not a happy story. There's no place in Wuquoit Bay, either the tributaries or the basins or any place in that bay that is healthy. And in fact, right now, most of it well, all of it is impaired, but there's just a little bit down in the Eel River lower here. It's right at the threshold, so it's moderately impaired, but that's it. It's a tiny little area right near the inlet. It's just inside the inlet over on that side. And the rest of the bay is pretty bad, except again, the lowest part in Wuquoit Bay, right down near the inlet, that's always going to be good. That you will always have a little bit of good water quality right near the inlets, because Nantucket Sound, Vineyard Sound is still in high quality. But it's a tiny little area, and even that's getting small, because really, if you look at Wuquoit Bay here and Wuquoit Bay here, it's banging up against that impairment zone, and it's over it in some cases. So even in that situation, it's impaired, which is not typical. All right, we looked at blooms. We're always worried about blooms. And what you see is that this red line down here is what the tidal water coming in from the sound is as phytoplankton biomass blooms, chlorophyll. And as you can see, in almost all cases, you have very high chlorophyll over that. And if you look in Quashnet, the 10, which is right about here, about 10, is impaired. It's eutrophic. And this goes up almost to 100. So it's just, as I said, Quashnet's in really bad shape. But, Charles River's not doing great either. And either is Eel River upper, mid now and upper. You look in the early days, not so bad. You're seeing spikes now in areas way up that you saw no spikes in mid Quashnet, and now you got the last 6 years, huge amounts. And you see it over here in Wuquoit Bay upper here. Where is it? Wuquoit Bay upper, there it is. You see they're high, but they're only around 10, and then now the last 6 years, this is the 3 years, and this is 19, 20, 21. This is 19, 20, 21, but the 3 years prior to that, sorry, and 16 to 18. And you can see that these are bumped up now. And those are high numbers for what you want. So it used to be that Wuquoit Bay, the main basin, had macroalgae in it, but there were areas that you could shellfishing and things like that. Now we're starting to get worried about some of that. Although shellfish can survive some of this stuff because they clam up. They just clam up and wait out.
Is there a reason why the anomaly for the 16 to 18, the grain, is off the
in
charts
that
compared
period,
to-
in the 16 to 18, the reason for the big spikes, that was when we had a cochlodydium bloom. A couple of years of that. It's a rust tide. It's a hazardous algal bloom, harmful algal bloom rather, and we had a couple of years. It hadn't occurred before. Just came in. It'll hit for a year or two. It'll go away, and then we just wait to see when it comes back. And when it did, it hit a whole bunch of estuaries. 3 bays was really bad. Our bays were bad. There were a couple other, but Buzzards Bay was bad. And it's the reason it's a harmful algal bloom is in some cases it can cause starvation to shellfish, but it didn't in this case. So
One question I have is, how does your methodology factor in normal rainfall seasons?
yeah, if we get a really weird rainfall season, we will look at it, and we know for a fact that when we have if we had like a hurricane, then we would see a very different if it can't happen mid-season or even in early August, we would see it in the water quality, and we would flag that. But none of these were on rainy days. None of these are even after major rainstorms. It was a great year. In fact, it was sunny every day. All right, but maybe did that answer your question?
Well, I guess the reason for my question is if the nitrogen and stuff is transported by rainfall, and that's the mechanism of transporting it, then if we're in a long-term drought, our normal rain season's going to compound these?
What
Figures.
we thought actually was the long-term drought lowers groundwater tables, and we track those. We do look at those. Whenever we do this, we look at those for the lake studies and for the estuaries. And they were pretty low there for a while, and that will cut down on the nutrient flux to the bay if it's a short-term drought. So it's not steady state. It was up here and then it dropped pretty quick, and then it'll come back up. Well, in that period when it dropped pretty quick, then you do get a diminution in the load to the bay, and you get a good year, and we think that may have been why 21 was as good as it was.
It'll be interesting to see what next August, where we didn't have the rainfall this year.
Mhm.
So it'll be interesting to see if,
Yeah.
like what you're saying, is the rainfall counting
Right.
for flowing all that to the water.
But the beauty of the methodology is that you do it, and you do it like you guys are doing it, and at the end, you've captured high rain, high groundwater, low groundwater, windy days, cloudy days, everything days. So when you look across a period of 3 to 6 years, you've hit everything. And remember, 6 years would be 24 dates in the summer sample. So that it averages that out, and then you can make a statement and a decision where you have some certainty about what you're doing, and you're not less shooting in the dark, So, but, yeah, that doesn't say 16 to 16, it should say 16 to 18, obviously. All right. What happened? Here we go. All right. Now, the reason, though, that we're seeing this, if you look over here, in this region over in here in the red circle, right? This is a model that shows nitrogen distribution in the bay, which is verified to the water quality program, all right? So it's not just a model, it is actually, though it's just a nice way to show the actual data, okay? And what you see is, in 2010, there was loading up here, but it was green, so it was down less, 0.8, whatever. And you see Charles River's bed, but then you look over and now, when it's built out, this isn't today, but built out, you see the quotient goes really bad, and that's what we're seeing. The quotient is getting worse and worse. Build out was based on a 20-year build out, which it would be halfway there kind of thing. Although I'd have to check with the town planner to make sure what it is today. We do updates to find out what it really is today, but the projection is that we should be about half there. And you can see all this is getting darker and darker, and the farther away it gets from blue, the more nitrogen loaded it is, and that's what you can expect sort of to happen. It's not going to get any better until you start cutting down on the loads, because build-outs happened. We can't stop it. It's going to happen unless we want to buy everybody's property. The only thing we can do is allow it to happen in a reasonable fashion and in a manner that doesn't contribute nitrogen. And right now, the only tool we really have for these is sewering and some of these other things like shellfish, as I said. So these are one-year trends. This is 19, 20, 21 is 3 separate things. This is an index that uses all our data. So it's chlorophyll, oxygen, water clarity, total nitrogen, chlorophyll, algal biomass, all the things are combined. It's a common health index that it was developed for Buzzards Bay when I was working there. And red means really pretty bad. It's, you're getting maybe a 30 out of 100. Nobody's going to pass you for that. There are no blue. There should be blue in here. There's virtually no blue. There's a tiny, tiny little half blue one there. But that's only in 21. In the previous years, no. And what you see is it's all these upper tributaries are showing really poor water quality. And unfortunately, Hamlin-Yehu system is starting to really degrade as well. You're seeing some reds and yellows, and red, yellows, and reds in there now where we didn't used to see them. The upper bay is really bad. And it's just, even this Seapit River is not doing very good. So it's just, we got to do something. It's time to be showing you guys improvements and waving the flag that look at what we did. And we know what to do. So the main thing is, whenever anybody talks about stuff, they say, well, water quality where I am is fine. You ask them where they are. Because if they happen to live right there, then yeah, maybe the water quality's not so bad, right? But if they happen to live, maybe like right here, even just lower part of the Charles, it's really crummy. And I personally, I go out there and I know that these match what you would see. As somebody who cares about the environment, you would look and say, it's not very good. And if you're fishing, digging, going in the sediments, looking for clamps, not so good. We still have shellfish in here, though, because they're sort of the last to go. All right. Okay. And then I'm not going to go through this other than to say that if you look over in this column here, this one right here, things are getting worse or not changing. But when it says not changing, it's severely degraded, not changing. That doesn't mean it's good. It means that it's severely degraded and it hasn't gotten any better. And the significantly impaired is slightly better than severely degraded, and that's unchanging. So, and then worst part was Lower Eel River looks like it's declining, and it was it's like the best part in the bay almost right now. And the lower main basin of Waquoit Bay is moderately impaired, but it's declining. So the few patches that we talked about are getting worse, which is what you'd expect because the water flows from the upland headwaters to the sea. And so with it, it carries all the bad stuff with it. All right, poppy. All right, I have an affinity for poppinescent, so this is nice. Mashpee River is so far above its limits, it's not worth talking about. All the way down to the mouth now, though, by the way. It's early days when we first started. It's the long-term average. Originally, it was down here. It was much lower. Now it's gone way up. And you see these blue bars are the long-term, like the MEP average from way back when, 97 through like 2006. So that's a big number, but see how low it is relative to these numbers that follow since 2010 up to present. So it's low, it's gone, it jumped up. And this was because that's a long-term average that stopped in 06. And this is an average that starts in 10 to 12. And that's pretty much the case all the way along. There's not much to say here. It's pretty much all the same and bad. But again, we see this thing where the upper Mashpee River now is jumping up and staying up over a 6-year period. Lower part's not so bad. 16, 18 was bad. It's a little bit bounced back. This is about the same. We had that one bad year here. But if you look over to Pinquisset, the nitrogen is high, and it actually has back to where it was high, but unfortunately what's happened is that we're starting to now see like blooms. You see this, there's that cochleodinium bloom there, all these green ones. And then they've returned back down again because the nitrogen really, other than in upper Mashpee River, it's been relatively stable. And now we're getting the blooms because of what you people asked. Well, what about rain? What about a very sunny year? Some years we have sun every day in the summer, and some years we don't. We have a lot of clouds. That makes a difference. Cloudy summers, we will get low dissolved oxygen and all sorts of other problems. Sunny summers, at least we keep the oxygen up usually. So, this is the variation. This is why you can't do 1 year. And especially once you build stuff and you start trying to track it, you're still going to have this inherent variation on top of it that you're going to have to look at. But again, 10, as I said, is the eutrophic threshold. So that's the difference between significantly impaired and moderately impaired, and then below this red line, unimpaired or healthy. So basically, you can't look at this graph, and the reason I didn't show 50,000 graphs is you look at this and it says, oh God, they're way over, and that's all you need to know. That's the take-home message. Same thing with the 3 years. Pinquisset's been really suffering in these 3 years now. I'm afraid it's going to just stay south. But the rest of the bay, there's nothing that's blue. Everything is, we get half blue one here and a half blue one there. That's because of water. Now, with the island that's formed here, low tide island formed here, we're starting to change some of the circulation of the bay with that. And so we think we might be getting a little flow up in this direction, and not just in this direction. Flow typically was this way through here and out there. But in any case, we're just not seeing anything good. Mashpee River is bad all the way from the head down to the mouth. And we're seeing more and more what you don't see on this map, but we take into account is more and more of those macroalgal accumulations. The macroalgae in this bay is reaching the point where it's starting to break the surface. From the bottom, the whole water column, other than maybe the top this much, during low tide is macroalgae. And that's just destroying the benthos and everything else. And plus it's a nuisance for people. People don't like it, so that they're starting to get angry. As we said before, there's no high-quality areas. There's no eelgrass left in the bay, and the benthic habitat throughout most of the bay, not the whole bay, is impaired. But again, there's still shellfish in this bay, too. Same thing, impaired, severely degraded, significantly degraded, blah, blah, blah. We had a change in Pinquisset. We've ranked it now to significantly impaired from what it was before. Now it's declining. And that's sort of where we are right now. So it's no good news, although you can always say that, well, geez, if it's this bad, then when we do something, we're going to get a really big bang for our buck. So that's a plus. We can sell that. So, but you can see your same thing. This is build out, this is not build out, right? This is at levels in 08, this is at build out, and what you see is it's just going to get, the Mashpee River is going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. And these are not red means bad. This is so high nitrogen that when we did new draft standards for the estuarine state standards for water quality, and if it was a number above 0.7, that's like everything's severely degraded. And you see that red on this stops at like 1.1 or something like that. So you're way over where you should be. And Shoestring Bay is going to become even worse than it is, and it's really bad now. That does have algae all the way to the surface in the summer, just floating mats of algae now. And I worry about, since I live in this town, I worry about tax base with it. You can charge people for a water view, but they have to be able to see the water. And in parts of Shoestring, you don't see the water in the summer. Rest of the bay, okay. From the top, it looks great. All right, so the overall findings are the impairments are increasing or staying the same, but they're not getting better. So overall, the bays are getting worse, just like you'd expect, because this has been a long-term program, and it's been development has occurred over a long time, very gradually. You'd never see it with a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year sampling. But with this type of sampling, where we go way back, we can see the changes. And we're seeing a gradual decline in the lower basins. The upper tributary basins are still significantly impaired, as you'd expect, because we haven't done anything. And frequency and magnitude of phytoplankton blooms are increasing, but you can't count it every year to happen. But I will tell you that the macroalgal accumulations are increasing. And it's just that we have clear evidence that there's these declines, and it's due to nitrogen. From all the results we've taken, we know we can detect when an action is undertaken, we know we can see it in the water quality. We know what works and what doesn't. So that's a good thing, because going forward, we're going to have to be able to document the positive changes that go on for the town to get credit to get these things off unlisted. We got to get them off the impaired waters list. The only way you can do that is to show that now they're not impaired. And by having this baseline, you can easily do that. You don't have to do a special big study to do it. You just do what you're doing and you can prove it. And we're hoping that we'll be able to track the phase 1 CWMP pretty soon. And then I do have, that's it. I do want to say, though, that the town staff, the Wampanoag tribe, and the private citizens that have taken part in this have been, year after year, they go out, they do it, they bring boats, they do their own stuff. We have 2 SMAS field teams as well with their families, so it's one of the scientists with their family that does it as well. It's a true team community effort, and I just want to thank the town and the people out there for this.
So one question I have is, with freshwater, I know we're focused on the nitrogen here at the bays, but the state is hyper-focused on the nitrogen, but with the freshwater being impaired to the point where they are, where you're seeing the algae blooms and things in June in lakes like Mashpee, Wakeby, the nitrogen becomes another stressor for freshwater body.
It's
and-
really the phosphorus in those
Yeah.
systems, in those specific freshwater systems. On the Cape, it is a rare thing for nitrogen to be the major stressor. They can get a little bit, but really what happens is those freshwater lakes remove a lot of nitrogen as it passes through them, and it never gets out. The cycling nitrogen within the lakes removes typically about 50% of the nitrogen that enters the lake.
That's my concern, when they're healthy. But
Yeah,
when
well,
they're-
I mean, if
when
you
they're
kill everything.
impaired, do they still get rid of the nitrogen?
Well, we're
the way
tracking
they-
that. I mean, usually they, even a really crummy pond will take out 50, 60% of the nitrogen. Even, and if it's really disgusting, it can even take out a little more. The problem is you've lost that whole resource. By the time it gets to that level, you have lost the resource. You no longer, you can't swim in it, nobody wants to boat in it, you can't fish in it. So that's the real problem. And what we think is happening, and we've done about 10 or 12 full restorations on the Cape already, my team has, for phosphorus. And another one's gonna happen pretty soon in Barnstable, I think this coming year. But what seems to have happened is that in the early days, people would come and they'd build their cottage next to the shore, right? And I grew up on a cottage in Pembroke in the summers on a lake, so I'm guilty. And what happened though is that our soils do not allow the phosphorus that comes out of a leach field, septic system leach field, really to make it very far. It sticks on the sediments because of the iron. So it comes out of the leach field and it sticks. But then you add more, and it goes, and this next slug gets a little further, and the next slug gets a little further. Eventually, you'll get to the bay, but it takes a long time. It could take 30, 40 years, and to get enough there. The problem is when we track the development on the Cape, it's been 30, 40 years. So it's recently, all these last 10 years, all these new blooms that we're seeing, we're starting to track back to, is just that we've finally just exhausted the aquifer between enough septic systems and the lake that they're built on. See what I mean? So that's why nothing happened for so many years, and then now we're starting to see it. Because the first one hits, that's not going to be enough to do anything. The second one hits, not going to be, see? But eventually enough hit, and every one is going to take 30, 40 years, say, and so then you finally reached enough phosphorus going into the pond to have a big effect. That's not the only problem. There's other problems. The ponds can have their own internal phosphorus really, but basically it all comes from outside of it. At some point it came from outside and it got into the pond. And whether it just is enough comes in every year to cause the blooms, or whether you're recycling what's already in the pond and that causes the blooms, doesn't matter. It all came from outside. And in those cases, there's some things that are online to be able to fix those. There's short-term fixes and long-term fixes. So if you had a really bad pond, you really had to fix it right away. You could fix it for 10, 15 years with different types of treatments, or while you're worrying about your stopping the source. And there are now some septic systems that will take out phosphorus that are pilot, though. They're still experimental, that are coming in the state of Massachusetts. I think there's 3 of them. And that at some point in the near future, those may become a tool that Mashpee and other towns could use. We're not using them yet because it would be a use at your own risk kind of thing, because they're still pilot.
Does your data reflect, because I suspect some of the problem is that we're having more year-round residents move to the Cape since people can work remotely and things. So, you know, from 2020 forward, is your data showing the effects of that year-round residency? You know,
Yes.
a lot of our water had time to heal
Pardon me.
when we were seasonal, but now I think your numbers are probably,
No, we will have to at some point go back and revisit that. But yeah, all the numbers we did looked at year-round versus seasonal housing. And yes, there's a difference. It's not as big a difference as you think, because frequently the summer homes have more people in them for the summer and like nobody in the winter. And the year-round houses have less people in them, but for the whole year. So there's more coming out of them, but it's not like, you know, double or triple or something. Not a simple math calculation. And what we have done for all our housing work is we look at the actual the pump meter data, the water meter data, and that's how we generate how much wastewater. So if a house was seasonal, we get the water use goes up, or down rather, in the winter. you have a lot of people there, you have a Super Bowl party, the water use goes up, you know, that kind of thing. So that is counted in the estuarine stuff. But now when we do the lake stuff, it's a more detailed watershed analysis because we're only worried about homes in a certain distance from the lake, let's say 100 years.
And when you do the sampling, do you test for various chemicals that might be indicators of stormwater contributing
We're mainly
opposed to
interested
septic?
in, if we're doing a lake study, we're mainly interested in phosphorus, although we do the nitrogen series too, because we're interested in where the water goes from the lake, you know, into the estuary. So we do both. But we're not looking at, some people that we are dealing with work on PFAS, work on contaminants of emerging concern, things like that. But pretty much, if you're finding a plume that originates at a septic tank, it's pretty clear it's septic stuff, so.
Anyone else? Yes.
So, Dr. Howes, as far as our water levels here in Mashpee, where do they compare to the rest of the Cape? Do you,
I'll have to check. I don't have that on top of my head, but I mean, that we're on the Sagamore lens, and so we have wells around, USGS and the state has wells around to measure the elevation of that lens. And I'd have to look for each thing, because remember, the lens discharges to the estuary, so we have to look somewhere up there, up gradient. That is and remember, the up gradient water, it pushes the lower gradient water in, so if that goes up and down, then the flow changes.
okay. So, so is the number one cause of, I guess, like you said, it's phosphorus for lakes,
For
fresh
lakes,
water?
yeah, pretty much. I mean, everything's not perfect, but yeah.
And then salt water would be
Nitrogen.
wastewater? Would that be the,
Well, that would be nitrogen in waste, wherever it comes from. It could be rain, could be wastewater. In our estuaries, most of the nitrogen's coming from wastewater, most of it. But if you look at the controllable load, and we can't control the atmosphere, right? So if you're gonna try to fix the bay, you're gonna have to fix something you can actually fix. And so we look at, in that case, stormwater and wastewater, things like that. And wastewater is 85% of the fixable load, because we can't control rain. So, and we also do analyses that have said that you have to always be careful and be really careful when you're doing this type of stuff to make sure that you're not setting a target that can't be met. So all of these things we've done, analysis to make sure that, yeah, if we went back to 1960, say, or 1965 loads, yeah, the bay would be totally great. It would be healthy, it would be fantastic. So we lower the loads and see what the response in the bay, and we prove that in fact, if you put sewering in, which is one of the things we do scenarios on, that you actually can restore the bay, because if you can't, then there's something wrong with your analysis, right?
so
Because the bay was good once.
to a statement you made earlier, you mentioned about like the seeping of leach fields, if you will?
Yeah.
Like it's over time?
Yeah, that was for phosphorus, yes, that we talked about.
So would you consider cesspools, if cesspools would have to be, if there's cesspools in Mashpee, they'd have to be 50-plus years old. And any cesspool that's, say, within 100 feet of water, I would guess that seepage could happen?
Well, for nitrogen, we've analyzed cesspools and Title V systems. Both are made to contaminate the groundwater. That's what they're built for. They're built to get rid of the water that goes into them. And if they stop leaching that water and contaminating the groundwater, then you dig them up and you put one in that does leach the water and contaminate. Their job is to put the waste, the treated effluent, into the groundwater in a manner that is protective of public health. That's a septic system or public health systems. So the idea is if they're built right and they're at the right distances, the bacteria and pathogens in the wastewater will not get into the water body or into a well. That's pretty much what it is. And that's pretty much what they do. And for phosphorus, it's a little different in that it's the same septic system or cesspool, but the thing is that the bigger, this is different than nitrogen, the bigger the leaching field, the slower it takes for the phosphorus to break through to the pond, because it's the volume of aquifer, just the mass of aquifer that plume has to go through that takes up the phosphorus. So if you have a little tiny little ribbon of it goes through, it breaks through really quick. If it's really wide, it all goes through that, then there's a lot of binding sites in there and it takes longer, but eventually it will break through if it's within, say, 500 or 1,000 feet of eventually. I mean, I'm talking now 100-year planning horizons, not 20.
So basically, what you just said is exactly what I was talking about. So
Oh, good.
cesspools,
Hey, we agree.
there's no big, long leaching field in
No.
a cesspool.
Yeah, for phosphorus, cesspools are a little tougher for phosphorus. I mean, not as good for phosphorus, because they, as you said, and I suppose, is that the groundwater path that plume from a cesspool takes is going to be narrower and less soil than would be a leach field, which is, they're huge, right? So, yeah.
It's not slowed down by a leaching field.
Well,
It's-
it'll be slowed down, there'll be less binding sites, maybe, a tenth or fifth the binding sites, which means that it breaks through to the pond quicker.
Right.
But if they're going to an estuary, they're gonna get there just pretty much the same. With nitrogen will get there pretty much the same. I'm trying, John.
And you mentioned Quashnet River being the worst, right?
Which being the worst?
Quashnet?
Oh, yeah, Quashnet is just a really bad tributary system. It's its own, but in Wacoit. But it's pretty much, personally, I think it's worse than the Mashpee River, actually. Mashpee River is bigger, has more exchange, has less load, so.
Anyone else have questions?
I do, Mr. House. I know we talked about this in the past, and to me, we talk about it frequently here, is the possibility of dredging, especially in the Mashpee River. I'm in there frequently. I know the muck is in the bottom. It's probably close to 3 feet of muck at some areas.
Yeah, no,
And I think you feel positively about dredging. It's the problem. The problem seems to be, where do we place the spoils? And that's been we did have a permit at one time to move forward, and the state stepped in and said, no, you can't put it.
That's right.
Would you think that would make more sense at this time to help the river, the streams to recover more quickly if we were allowed to dredge?
We looked into the dredging and in the Mashpee River, and you only could get a little bit of additional flow. It's pretty much doing its thing. The disposal problem was really painful, because I thought we had a good plan. I thought the town had a good plan, because I worked on that project. And it was to expand the wetland area within the Mashpee River with the spoil. So basically, you'd be making spoil islands with salt marsh and everything else on them. But the state, they just wouldn't go for that. There were too many restrictions on how close it could be to existing marsh. And of course, you really want it pretty close up, because then it becomes one marsh. But it just fell through. But on the dredging thing, Mashpee River is so bad that you can't, if you're running double the nitrogen load concentration that you should, or triple, that means you'd have to increase the water flow, like roughly, not exactly, but double or triple. And there's no way we can double the tidal exchange or even get a 10% increase in flow in the Mashpee River. So I know that you and I have talked about this before in terms of, is it worth doing, is it not? I think that analysis, I listened to you last year and I thought about it, and I thought about it prior to this meeting, with the idea that in a case of the Mashpee River, we can't get enough flow to make a discernible difference if we dredge. So we'd spend the money and you wouldn't get a discernible effect. It would be nice if we could build additional marsh, bring it back sort of the way it was. It once had more marsh in it, especially in the lower part of it, and because that actually helps to clean the water too, and also provides wildlife habitat and all this other stuff. But I'll do that in my retirement.
Yeah, it's just the amount of muck that's at the bottom of that river is,
Yeah.
it just. overwhelming. I mean, I've stepped in it where you go up above your knee, and it's just an awful lot to ask the river to clean itself.
But sea levels is rising it's always been rising. It's been rising for 18,000 years here. It's a glacial thing. And the bays aren't getting deeper. So what happens is the bottom of the bays have also been accumulating sediment for all that time too. That's why they don't get deeper or shallower over even millennia of deposition. So it doesn't surprise me there's that much stuff in the Mashpee River, especially with the wetlands that are there. But if you go out to any salt marsh like in Wacoit or in other side of the Cape, most of them are built on top of freshwater marshes. So is all the Wacoit marshes. They're built on top of freshwater marshes. So they've only been saline for about 2,000 years, even though you got maybe 4 or 5 feet of freshwater marsh below them. So, things have been rising and everything rises with them. So, but unfortunately, I don't think, if I thought that there was we could get a 5% increase in Mashpee River by dredging, I would probably support that project very strongly. But we did some modeling and stuff for the town. We worked with the town. We worked with the Waterways Commission for a whole bunch of things. And we came up that, no, we couldn't get enough. It was within the uncertainty of prediction. And I don't think you want to spend, $200,000 for uncertainty of prediction, right? But maybe you do. I mean, it could, it's up to you. I'm not going to tell you to do your job. You're doing fine.
With your professional experience and your professional opinion, courses of corrective actions that you would encourage would increasing wetland boundaries and wetland buffers be advisable in your
I think that
profession?
wetland buffers, that 150 or 100 foot, depending on how you fit in the reg, buffer zone, I think is really important, especially for lakes. It just is. Plus, just in a normal sense of trying to restore a little bit of our natural environment, it gives a refuge for wildlife and such. As long as you allow people to, if they own that buffer strip, to have a path through it. You want to be able to get to the dock or get to the little beach or whatever. But wetland buffers are more and more important now, mainly in lakes, but also in areas of estuaries as well. So people don't build their lawns right down to the water.
And also with protecting flood zones, is that encourageable to protect? I mean, they filter, they're natural filters.
The flood zone or you mean like in a river?
Yeah, flood zones, and then also piggybacking that, with climate adaptation, climate change, we're trying to help support and sustain habitats.
Yeah, that's
so encouraging protection of existing flood zones so that, areas have the capability to change, adapt as the sea level rises rapidly. Is it advisable in your professional opinion to go that path?
I agree with that. It's also for salt marshes, you have a salt marsh that's up against a land like a scarp or something, but isn't armored. That if that isn't armored, then that system will move and adjust and everything. But if you armor it, it's one of the reasons that it's hard to get a permit to put in riprap these days, is that the system can't adjust. That marsh will just collapse. As sea level rises, the marsh moves back and it'll just collapse right into the armor, and pretty soon it'll just be water right up to the revetment. And that's not seen as a good thing. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, no
Any
problem.
other
You good?
questions?
Ray? Anyway, we'll get there, Tom.
I hope you're right.
Thank you.
Sooner better than later.
All right.
Thank you for all the years of data. Next, we have communications and correspondence. I would like to remind everyone that the Community Preservation Act has scheduled a public meeting to solicit community input on the needs. The Community Preservation Committee needs your input on how Mashpee should prioritize spending these important funds. This public meeting will be held on Thursday, October 6th at 6:30 at the Mashpee Senior Center, 26 Frank Hicks Drive. Written comments can be submitted via email to ksores@mashpeema.gov. Anything else to add on that? Town manager? No. Next, we have new business. Town manager, discussion relative to Bowden Road.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We have a situation on Bowden where there's parking on both sides of the road, and one of the problems is the fact that it's cracking some of the asphalt, and I'm going to send some pictures around for the board to take a look at. The purposes of this discussion is to determine whether or not you want to hold a public hearing to determine whether or not you want to limit one side of the road to no parking, or both sides of the road, or take no action. Obviously, if you wish to take no action, then I don't need any public hearing. But I think considering what we have been told by staff and taking a look at the pictures, we probably need to take some sort of action, because we do have dumpsters that are in the roadway, and we have cars all over the place, and right now, it seems to be a little chaotic. I don't know if the assistant manager wants to add anything.
No, we had discussed this prior, when I was on the board, and there were issues with the parking. What happens is a lot of the big trailer trucks for one of the lumber yards there and the marina on the other side, they park their vehicles on the side of the road waiting for them to open. And when that happens, they're sitting there with heavy loads on the pavement, cracking
We
it
had stopped
and
that,
causing
right?
that.
We had stopped them parking in the front.
Right, and we also had done some road work.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's breaking down. They're parking more and different vehicles out there. So just wanted to get an idea from the selectmen if they had any desire to look at no parking or not.
And there's people coming in and out of that road constantly. I personally think we need to do no parking. Because you have trucks going in to pick up lumber, you got them going into the boatyard, you got them going into the electrical places. So I think it's a hazard right now with the parking on the road.
Has police or fire, are they concerned at all?
This was brought to our attention through DPW, but like I said, we can take no action, or we can take whatever action the board prefers. The only thing is, if you are going to restrict the parking, then we have to do a public hearing.
Let's do a public hearing.
Is that a town road?
Bowden, yes.
It is a town road. So why can't we have the business owners provide parking for their vehicles on their land?
We can do whatever the board
I
wants.
mean, it doesn't seem fair that the town should have to repair the road repeatedly for their deliveries to be brought on and sitting on our land, making the travel lanes not even usable. I mean, if you have one on each side with contractors going down, it makes sense to me that they should provide parking for any deliveries on their own property.
I don't believe it's reached the point where there's not accessible travel on both lanes, but it is somewhat restricted, and there is, obviously, based on the pictures that I just showed the board, there's some damage that causes us concern to the extent that probably some action should be taken.
Are those dumpsters at the end, town road? Is that, they're sitting on a town road?
Yeah, it
That
doesn't,
itself, yes. That doesn't make any sense.
I just think they should be able to provide the parking and not on the street. It's not a parking area, it's not marked off as parking. You know, I'm sure they're gonna have to
I
The
think we
marina
should.
is big enough to
We
allow
we
for
can
that.
certainly remove anything that is on a public way, but typically it would be posted, no parking.
Right.
And obviously, it's fair to say that the dumpsters, that's another thing altogether.
Yes.
I mean, one of the things that jumps out at me is, the degradation of the Cape Cod berm on the shoulder. So you're getting stormwater runoff and, you can see the silts and everything are collecting. We must have to clean that catch basin all the time. I mean, that's
that-
gotta be an expense, so,
That is why this is in front of you.
yeah.
No.
I suggest we hold a public hearing and do a,
I'm not sure what the answer is. I don't know if,
Oh,
parking, I'm
and Mr. Chair, the basins are failing also as a result.
sure. That's one issue. As far as, the road does look like it's in serious disrepair. I don't know when the last time we fixed it. I don't know if parking's gonna address all the issues that we see in these pictures. But I think we need to figure something out, and I take any recommendations of the Kathleen, DPW director, or anyone else that has relative say over our roadways.
I'd be more than happy to have the director at the next meeting.
She could provide recommendations.
Yes, well, I think
as to what-
the recommendation is no parking.
That's the only recommendation?
Well, I don't think that's the only recommendation, but it's something that would require the public hearing.
So are you looking for a motion to schedule a public hearing?
I would like the board to direct us to have a public hearing,
Yes, that
if
makes
that's what
sense.
you're inclined to do.
So moved.
I'll
second.
second, yeah.
Hearing a first and second, all those in favor of
Yes.
holding a public hearing, do we have to schedule that?
Yes,
now?
that's within
10 days.
10 days,
It'd be November 7th at this point because of town meeting and everything else we've got
So
going on.
we frame the motion with the
at the November 7th.
November 7th meeting.
And we'll also let all of the folks on Bowden know.
Okay,
We'll notify them,
okay.
so they can't say, well, I didn't know. Right.
Hearing a first and second, Ms. Sherman?
Yes.
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 Ms. Hogan? And I'm a yes on that as well. All those in favor? All those were unanimous, that motion passes for a public hearing to be held on November 7th, was it,
Yes, sir.
Yes.
on that matter?
Mr. Chairman, if I can just add one more thing to that. I'm concerned that, I don't think we need a public hearing to tell people to take the dumpster off the town
No,
road.
we do not.
Okay.
I just saw
So I
those.
just,
Yeah.
that's the part, okay. I just want to make sure we're on the same page with that.
You can take care of that regardless of what you do tonight.
Thank you very much.
Next item, town manager discussion relative to the Harbor Management Committee.
Yes, we did a lot of research, and this goes way, way back. I've got Harbor Management Plan meeting minutes. I've got a Coastal Resource Management Plan and Municipal Harbor Plan, and for some reason, and I don't know why, is Tom Fidel still here?
He just walked out.
I have no idea, but on the cover of this report is a young lad going right across the dunes, trampling the dunes. But at any rate, the Harbor Management Committee was formed many years ago, but it has been stagnant, and I'm looking for it to be reestablished. It did consist, back in the day, of a select board member, the harbor master, the planner, the shellfish constable, and the conservation agent. What we're looking to do, and the recommendation is to add the DNR director, the waterways Commission or Committee member and a tribal member and the Shellfish Commission member, so designated, which would basically follow suit with what we did have, with the exception of the Assistant Town Planner, which we couldn't have because we no longer have an Assistant Town Planner. That would be the recommendation, but obviously, if the board wants a different composition, then so be it. What that would give you right now is a total of 9, and we think if it's any larger than that, then it's sometimes dysfunctional.
Sure.
So that is a number that everyone is comfortable with. I want to just reiterate that this really has not been in existence for a long, long time. I don't think it's been active, if I'm not mistaken, is the DNR director? Yes. If I'm not mistaken, it hasn't been active since the charter change. But it did exist, and we're just looking to reestablish it. And in reestablishing it, that would be the recommended membership. So there wouldn't be a need to necessarily advertise because essentially it's staff. It's up to the board.
I'd accept a motion to approve the composition as stated by Town Manager to reestablish the Harbor Master Committee as proposed.
So moved.
Second.
Hearing a first and second. Mr. O'Hara?
Yes.
Mr. Cotton?
Yes.
Ms. Sherman?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well, also.
Thank you, that's all set.
That vote, that motion is unanimous and passes.
Yes.
Next item, we have Town Manager review of open meeting law complaint from a Meredith Kilpatrick.
Yes, there was a complaint dated September 13th, 2022, and I have looked at the complaint, and I have reviewed with Town Council, and as a result, I would say that there is no remedial action required, and I'm going to just refer to the gist of it. In consideration of the nature of the allegations set forth in the open meeting law complaint and for the reasons stated contained within the letter, the requests for remedial action set forth in the complaint are deemed to be unwarranted and thus are hereby declined for the specific reasons. If you need further read, then I'd be more than happy to read into the record, but essentially, it's a 2-page letter that has been reviewed by Town Council.
I'm fine with the letter, and you need a motion to, we already took the motion
Yeah,
to
you
respond.
made a motion to authorize the action, and the next complaint was essentially, well, I shouldn't go into the next one until you finish with this one. Are there any questions?
There's no action needed at this time on
No, there's
this
no
matter.
action needed at this particular time, given the response.
No, and I'm comfortable with the response if the board is. Any questions from the board?
So we just accept it, right?
Next matter, discussion of open meeting law complaint from Mary Leclerc with regard to the September 12th, 2022 meeting of the Board of Selectmen. This one, we do need a vote to authorize the town manager to respond to the complaint.
Essentially, it's the same elements. The response is attached. Again, that's been reviewed with Town Council. If you have any questions, obviously I'm here.
Yes, you did.
If not, then I would just ask for the board to affirm the contents of the letter. If you have any questions, I would certainly try to answer them.
So you just need a motion
I'd
to affirm.
entertain a motion to respond to the letter and the time allowed to stay in compliance with the procedural process of the open meeting law. So moved. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Having a first and second, roll call vote.
Yes.
Ms. Sherman?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Yes.
And I'm a yes, so that vote's unanimous?
Just point out, I'm not sure where you named it. Would he abstain?
Do I need to recuse on that?
No.
No? Okay, no big deal. I just wanted to just make sure we're, okay.
Oh, good catch.
You're just affirming the action that,
Okay, yeah, I just didn't want to put us in.
It requires, yes. Additional topics. Liaison reports?
I have one, only it's the, about the Christmas parade, if anybody would like to step forward and volunteer to contact the chamber. It's an outdoor parade, holiday parade.
Do you have a date on that?
Yeah, we have a date. That's right, you need to get a hold of somebody for that. I forgot. It is Season of Blooming.
You can get back to me on that.
Okay. It's
That's
right
always
here,
a
it's in
well-
your packet, it's in your packet.
That's always a well-attended event. Everyone looks forward to.
Yeah, they do. Santa Claus will be there, hopefully.
Anyone else have liaison reports?
No, I don't.
Town manager updates.
yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The only thing I'd like some advice and direction from the board on is, as you know, we're changing over the town seal. There is a sign out here that right now is in gold and black. So we've got two choices. We can either redo the entire sign and make the seal the colors that it is depicted in this sign up here that you can't see right now because of the screen. Or we could do what is currently on the old seal
Oh, the gold and black?
out there, and this is what it's gonna look like. So I want you to take a look at this. Obviously, replacing the whole sign is gonna be a little bit more costly, and I can get an estimate on that. If you want us to do it this way, then we don't need to discuss it any further. But if you don't like the gold and the black, then I'm gonna get an estimate for a whole new sign.
I think that might stand out better on our signs. The black background.
It's a major change.
There's no way that they could, core out the perimeter and kind of do like an insert of just the seal and change out just that component?
Well, on the one out front, I'm not sure of that, but the two that are on the buildings, it wouldn't be able to be done. It have to
Yeah,
be
that, you
replaced.
wouldn't be able to do that. But I mean, wood, I don't know if there's a way of,
They may be able to do it on that.
We
I
can-
don't
we can
know.
check into that.
I can check for you.
because it seems as though you could, if you slice it and then cut out just the shape, put a new one in, dovetail it in from different points, you kind of piece it back together and it might not be as costly, it might be more. I have no idea.
I know that, David, the reason they did the black and gold is because that's what presently the colors are on all of the signs. And
Right.
to try to keep it uniform is why they looked.
I think the black
mean, I think-
background will look nice with the present colors. This, I'm not sure that I'm.
I think not that I
Excited.
want to end up spending more money, but I think the colored one would really look good.
Right.
Yeah,
I do. I'm not really feeling that at all.
Yeah,
Well, I wasn't either, but on the other hand, I'm saying,
Tell the way
From
you
a cost
handed it off.
saving, cost savings perspective.
I don't want to be accused of being the big spender.
So,
Ballpark, what do you
What do you
kind of?
think?
You have to look into
I
it, right?
haven't checked yet.
Yeah.
I haven't checked yet.
I agree. I like the color and
You like it?
Yeah, as
Looking at the
the
color.
way it's printed, not as this is drawn. Not-
Okay.
Not those colors.
All right, so let me get some
I do
prices.
appreciate your conservative approach, though.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll check further.
Get the prices.
We got some guidance, that's all I needed.
Okay.
I'm good.
That was all you had for updates?
Yes, sir.
Okay. No executive session. That would brings us to adjournment. I'd accept a
Motion.
motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
First and second, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone.